Hello, everyone. We're just waiting for a couple of more people to join in. To everybody who's joining, we're just waiting like a couple of more minutes so that we have a few more attendees and then we'll start with the webinar. Martin, shall we start on like 11:05?
Sure,
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
To everybody that is joining, we're waiting for like another minute before we start. Just gives a few more minutes for people to join in. All right, Martin, good to go?
Good to go.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. Hope you can hear me and all of us. Today, we are starting this webinar, which is for empowering developer innovation while balancing speed, security, and scale. I'm Vaishnavi Nashte. I'm the head of marketing at Test Associates, and I'm thrilled to have you all here with us. And I know we're joining We've been joined by folks from all over the world today, and I hope y'all are having like a sunny day, unlike UK weather today, which is apparently like, yeah, very cloudy. At least here in Brighton. But yeah, let me introduce our company as well for a bit. Test Associates, we've been celebrating innovation and excellence in tech for the last 20 years. We have been doing this by organizing some of UK, India, and Toronto's best award ceremonies and conferences. And I mean, I don't mean to brag, but we are truly the best when it comes to QA and DevOps events. We now have the Asia Pacific Software Testing Awards and the National DevOps Awards coming up in India and London, respectively. We also have the National Software Testing Conference coming up in 20 days. This will again be held in London. So if you want to learn more about these events, if you want to attend, if you want to participate, please contact us at hello@testassociates.co.uk. It's also there up there in my virtual background. Before we actually dive into the webinar, I'd like to take a moment to introduce our partner for today's session, Harness. Harness is a software delivery platform that helps engineering teams achieve the highest levels of engineering excellence. In today's session, we'll explore how to balance speed with control through automation and self-service. Today, our guest speaker is the brilliant Martin Reynolds, who is the field CTO of Harness. Martin has over 30 years of experience in the software industry. He's worked across a wide range of technologies and platforms, helping teams deliver software at scale. And today he's with Harness, working to empower organizations to modernize their software delivery practices to make them more faster, more secure, and more resilient. So without any further ado, welcome, Martin. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Very excited to share this morning. So I think I will jump right in. So as I share my screen, I want to also introduce my colleague who's joined today, Hamza. Maybe you can just do a quick introduction of.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Martin. My name is Hamza. I'm a senior solutions engineer. Been in this industry for 6 years, doing a variety of things from data center, observability, software development. I'll be co-hosting today with Martin. Thanks for that.
Awesome, thank you. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump right in here. And before I kind of start, you heard the little description of Harness at the start, but I think what really sums us up is our own mission statement, which is really to enable the world's 30 million software developers to deliver code quickly, reliably, efficiently, and securely. And one of the reasons I joined Harness in the first place, and one of the reasons I was a customer of them previously, is because they really live to that mission. And if you're delivering software today, there's probably something we can help you with. So jumping into the whole purpose of today's talk, which is how do you really drive and enable developers to deliver software reliably and repeatably and securely while not stifling the innovation that you want from them. This whole everything that came in here came from my own experiences, came in from the experiences of customers that we work with, and we kind of consolidated all those best practices together to come up with this list of things that really help. So to really set the scene, what I wanted to do was talk a little bit about the problem that we face in today's software delivery lifecycle. So what we've got here on this slide, and we're going to build it out a little bit as we go through this, is kind of the current state of software delivery. And one of the things that's quite cool with this slide is that it has these bars at the top that you can see where it is going to kind of, as you go through the software delivery life cycle, you're going to see the impact on time, on cost, on people, etc. across the piece here. And I think that is really, helps really show the impact of some of the challenges we face in delivering software today. So, we're going to start this kind of right at the start with the kind of developer onboarding process. And often that can be painful, because there's disparate information systems, getting the right access to all the systems and getting access to the code, and sometimes those onboarding processes can actually be months before you have a productive developer. ultimately, though, once they get hold of the code and they've kind of learned everything that they need to learn to be able to contribute, you actually do some coding, and then the next phase of challenges starts. So you will have you've written your code, you've done your new feature or your bug fix, and you're excited to push that out into production. But actually, there's the build process that you have to go through. There's probably required security testing, code quality testing, maybe SBOM generation, that all needs to happen as part of that before you can even push your artifacts up to your artifact store. And even there may be some resilience testing or unit testing that needs to happen, and all this needs to happen as part. And as you can see, we're already starting to pile up the number of tools that we're using to do this. So you might have your code repository like GitHub, and then maybe Jenkins for build, and you might be using SonarQube and Checkmarx and JFrog, and then goodness knows what else across the piece for that testing. Then once you've built it, you actually need to take it through your release process and deploy it to probably multiple environments, maybe a dev environment, a QA, a test environment, maybe even a user acceptance environment, and then ultimately push that to production. And that requires actually spinning up and maintaining infrastructure for that application to be, or service to be deployed to, managing the change management process, updating your ticketing system, whether that's ServiceNow or Jira or whatever else is that you use. Maybe you have to do some database deployments and you rely on a separate database team to do that. And then you've got the tools that you're using to actually deploy that into those production environments. And maybe you even need to do some complex deployment strategies in there, like a blue-green deployment or a canary deployment. All of this is adding time, cost, more people, and actually developer dissatisfaction across the piece. And this is one of my least favorite memories and favorite memories, although not one that I'd ever want to go back to, is that process of, hey, we've done this deployment, and I worked at one organization where we had a pizza Thursday. We'd deploy, and then we'd all sit there and kind of babysit this deployment, making sure that it was okay, verifying that everything was fine and we could keep it up and running, and doing this all the time just adds more of a toll onto the engineering teams and the support teams that have to go through that process every time you're doing a release. And then if something does go wrong, how prepared are you for that rollback process? Is it straightforward? Is it integrated into your tool chain? And that goes across the piece. So that's kind of the process, but then there's some underlying things that need to happen across software delivery, and I would say in almost every environment today. So you have governance and security that is kind of across the piece, right? So that might be who can access what environment, what's the maintenance efforts across those pipelines. You can see there's a whole bunch of tools that span across this. Is everything audited? Does it meet the compliance for the industry and that you're working in? Is it regular, those regulatory compliance requirements? Are you managing all your secrets so that nothing's leaking out? And again, controlling that across the piece. And then, rolling into that, if you're doing all these things, how are you measuring that? How are you making sure that you have all the right information so that you can see where those bottlenecks are, see where you can have the most impact by improving a particular process or a particular way something's implemented to reduce that kind of toil that happens across the piece. And then finally, there's the cost. And I think when we talk about cost, that's both cost in terms of, what am I spinning up in the cloud or in my data centers, and what's the impact of the changes I'm making? What's the cost of that whole process? And it kind of overlaps with that metrics and analytics is, how are my smartest, brightest people that I've employed in my business or in the organization to deliver great software, how are they spending their time, and are they spending their time doing the things that they love and doing the things that bring the most or the best outcomes? So I've kind of set the problem, but let's now talk about, some of those common practices and those principles of great developer experience that help us solve those problems. Now, as I've said, this has come across from multiple of our customers and my own experience. across the piece, from organizations like Booking.com and Citibank and JPMC and just a whole bunch of different organizations that have kind of contributed and helped feed in to kind of these core principles. So let's start with some of the softer things that you need to build a great developer experience. So, and I'm going to pick customer-focused culture first. So often when you're building a developer experience program or process into your organization, the reality is that, the engineers, the developers, the product owners, these guys are the customer of that developer experience, and so just like if you're building any product, and there's a lot to learn from good product management in terms of building great DevX, right? You need to be servicing your customer where your customer is the, is the engineer. And to be able to do that, you're going to need some backing to remove some of the roadblocks and things that might happen along the way. So you can't do this in isolation from a ground up only approach. You do need some executive sponsorship, and you need to be able to talk about the benefits of having a great developer experience. I did have a CEO a few years back who, one of the things he said, we were trying to shift our culture and modernize, and he said, we have a great strategy that we've built as a leadership team. We think it's a great strategy, but he said, you know what, culture eats strategy for breakfast, and you need to bring the culture of the organization along with that strategy of providing great developer experience, and that might be things like shared responsibility, having that continuous improvement, and going on the journey together to a great developer experience versus, trying to inflict what you think great DevX is on the engineers and the teams. So next, one of the things that really helps is having shared workflows. Now, this really falls into two parts, right? And we're going to talk a little bit later about things like golden pathways and landing zones. But actually, one of the things that really helps is a shared workflow in terms of processes that you do within your organization. So how do you build and deliver software in your organization? Having common stage gates that you use, having common set of environments that you use, having a similar process for the way you run Agile. Does that mean that everybody needs to be exactly the same? No. Does it mean that there should be some, core must-haves in that process that help you to measure? Absolutely. And there's some other benefits around there, right? So, if you have that kind of standardization, that makes it easier to automate and automate at scale and share those things out across the organization. Do you know what? It also enables great cross-team visibility where you can say, hey, we're doing this, and this team's doing this thing really well, and this team over here is not doing that so well, but they're doing something else great. And you can see that because there's a common flow in the way the software is delivered, but that also allows that shared best practice process to really happen. Hey, this team's been doing this great, and they've been doing it reliably great for the past 3, 4, 5, 6 months. How do we extract that and share that with the other teams? Now, those other teams are easily able to adopt that because they have a similar process, with those core stage gates along the way. So that kind of shared approach really helps drive that at scale. So let's move on to those golden pathways, right? So these are your standard routes to production, right? So, and it might be that you say, hey, we deploy to Kubernetes in AWS with EKS, or we also have some serverless options that we deploy to, or we have, we also have an AKS in Azure, right? And these are your golden paths to production with all the stage gates that anyone who's going to that, I'll call it a landing zone or secure by design architecture, or, your platform in terms of platform engineering, or one of your platforms that you have in terms of platform engineering. What's the standard path to production, right? And if you've got that paid pathway, that common workflow that says, hey, I want to get a service and I need to deploy it into AWS estate on on Kubernetes with a MongoDB behind it, then great. Here is the path out of the box to production that will guarantee that your service gets there. And it does all the right things along the way. It does the right security testing. It has all the right auditing. It creates and manages all the tickets for the change management. Once you have this, you get consistency, you get efficiency, and it generally reduces cognitive load, and it makes it easier for engineers. One of the stats I've seen, we've seen it from surveys that we've run ourselves, but we've also seen it from other external surveys across the industry. On average, engineers are working with 14 or 15 tools, whether that's multiple security tools, their ticket management tool, if you have a good integrated pipeline, you can actually get the engineers the information they need from all those tools without necessarily them having to learn all the different tools. Most organizations have more than one security tool, and having a consolidated view of that would really help, for example. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to break from why this is great to talk about what we do at Harness, right? At Harness, we have, 17 and growing products within our suite, our integrated platform. And what we wanted to do is make sure that we're actually following our own best practices that we recommend out to other people, and so that's exactly what we did. We literally practice what we preach. We've created a reusable template for our Kubernetes deployments. We've integrated all the best practices, with automated security and compliance checks. It's faster, it's more reliable, and it means that we have consistent deployments across all of our teams. It's reduced that cognitive load and simplified onboarding for developers, because essentially there is a path to production. There's one, it's well known in the organization, and it's easy for them to adopt because it's really a simple path to production. And it's really fostered collaboration between our multiple teams across the organization, because beyond, I said we have, the 17 current products and growing, but, we have a platform team, we have shared services that are in there as well. And it's allowed us to kind of standardize those workflows at scale across our whole organization. That's just accelerated our innovation within the organization, and really made it so we can keep delivering reliably, and to put that in context, over the last year we delivered more than 14,000 new features across our product set, and part of that is driven by having this common approach to delivery. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about having guardrails, not gates, and this is really about having enabling autonomy but doing it safely. And the way most people these days work in some kind of regulated environment. I think, whether that's with GDPR data or, auditing requirements because you work for a bank or a healthcare organization, making sure that all the right steps happen along the way in that road to production is really critical. And that, to do that, you need to have automated checks into your self-service. You need to use things like policy as code to drive that, or, those consistent automated checks. You need great role-based access control to make sure that people have the right access to the right things, and what we really want to do here is we want to have freedom, but with boundaries, reducing the risk. And we want to make it super, super easy for engineers and developers to do the right thing and hard for them to do the wrong thing, because generally engineers will take the easy path, and that's not a criticism. I was an engineer for many years. The easiest path to production is the best path to production, as far as I'm concerned. And if that path allows me all the freedoms I need, to innovate while making sure I'm not putting the business at risk, and I'm doing all the right things along the way, that's a great approach to software delivery. So the last thing I'm going to talk about before we show you some kind of hands-on about how we do this, in the Harness platform, is metrics. And in fact, the first time I ever did this presentation, I did alongside Booking.com, and we talked about having metrics. But then once we got on the stage, my peer from Booking.com, he got up and he said, it's not just metrics, it's metrics, metrics, metrics. You need to measure everything along the way so that you can have clear, actionable insights, right? And you can drive continuous improvement around productivity, around satisfaction, and around business impact. Now, there are some caveats with that, right? You need to be consistent with the measurements that you use. You need to choose measurements that align with outcomes, that align with outcomes for the organization, not just the engineering organization, and you need to be using hard and soft metrics. What do I mean by hard and soft metrics? I mean, hard metrics are things like, your DORA metrics, your mean time to resolution, your time to live, your build times. These are your hard metrics, but you also need those soft metrics, right? You remember right at the start, I said, if you're building out great DevX, you want great developer experience, your customer is those developers, those engineers, those product owners, those QA testers, right? If you want to have that great developer experience for them, you need to talk to them and you need to find out how they feel about the things that you're building for them, and take that kind of sentiment type impact as well. Again, be consistent with those questions, otherwise it's difficult to measure improvement. So we're going to go from here, and I've done a lot of talking, so I'm going to let Hamza do a bit more of the talking and a little bit more of the showing as well. I'm going to ask him to share his screen at this point. I would also say, if you guys want to ask questions, please just drop them in that Q&A section and we'll try and pick them up at the end. So with that, I'm going to hand over to you, Hamza, if you want to share your screen.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Let me just share my screen quickly. And please let me know if you can see it properly.
I can see that, so I think we're good to go.
Awesome. Great. Cool.
So I guess starting at the top with like that kind of customer focus in mind, where the customer is the engineers, product owners, QAs, testers, etc. Can we start with a look at where I find all the information I need, if whether I'm onboarding or taking a new service or looking after an existing service, and what kind of things does it show?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I started in that page already, so kind of like preceded the question. But if you look at where we are right now, this is an internal developer portal, and this is where you're going to find all that information. And that's also where you're going to start as a developer your journey on delivering those different services. So in this landing page, what you can see is the central place where you can find everything you need to build, deploy, manage your services. You can have access to quick pipeline templates. Martin was talking about these, and we're going to dive into them in a minute. The documentation, the services I've recently worked on, the pull request, really anything that needs my attention. So all these things are personalized based on my view of the world as a developer, on the projects I'm working on, and basically helps you cut through the noise and the context switching Martin was talking about, navigating 5-6 different screens. Now, if I want to dive into a more defined view, let's say a service. So we have a variety of services here in my service catalogs. These are all the things that we are building, that we're potentially deploying into our different environments. And if I pick this one, for example, what we're looking at here in this case is a live auto-populated view of that service entry. So instead of having the information being scattered across different wikis, across different teams, everything is brought together automatically. So you can see here in this case the repository where the code lives. You can see where it's deployed to, in what environment. We can also see all the different test coverage linked to the service, the scorecard, which defines the maturity and the health of it, the different relationships and dependencies with other services. So all the information that you see here are not just a static snapshot. It actually stays up to date automatically as you're deploying, changing configurations for your services. So you're looking at a real current state of that service. And to Martin's point earlier, the real benefit here is that it creates this single source of the truth for the whole team. So developers know exactly what's running and where, Platform teams get visibility and control over what's deployed and where. And for anyone onboarding or picking up a new service that you never worked on, this is an opportunity to avoid all that digging through Slack or, institutional knowledge or wikis to learn how to deploy these things and remove the friction you have between all these different teams.
That's looking awesome. I love it. There's two things I always love on this screen is, one that kind of, I love the scorecard, but I also love the dependencies bit, like where else is this thing? I will quickly mention one of our customers, IntelliFlow, who they really empowered their engineers by actually delivering an IDP, and their first target when they implemented their IDP was bringing in every service just so that engineers could see what services they had and how mature they were in their delivery. And it really allowed them to drive forward innovation. It also really cut back their time to onboard for their engineers. And they it made a real impact into the growth of innovation in their service. So, one of the other things that we talked about, one of the foundations that we talked about was this shared workflow, but we want shared workflow with some freedom to innovate, right? So, we want guardrails, not gates. So can you show me an example of how that works?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's imagine we want to create a new service, in this case, for example, a Java service. If I head into the IDP and can kick things off with this UI, what you're going to see is a variety of different golden workflows for different types of services and application. And this is not just scaffolding some starter code. This is actually as you said, a full production ready path that already meets these strict compliance and security requirements. And in a lot of environments, to achieve these things, you'd be stitching across, different tools like ADO, GitLab, Jenkins pipelines, custom scripting, manual quality checks, and security checks. And here, instead, you have like a unique service workflow ready to be used without having the need to juggle through tickets or go through delays. Now, if I actually want to create a new service, all I have to do is fill in a few information because this workflow is already defined for me. So I'll give it a name. I'll give it a unique repo name. Could be like Java app, for example, or Java app project. It doesn't really matter. And then I can define, having that guarded freedom, what kind of deployment, what kind of infrastructure, what kind of application I want to create here, and give it a scope. So who in my user sets are going to be able to see or touch, etc., this service. And just in a few clicks, I've been reviewing all this information and I can kick off the creation of the service. And what you see here effectively that is happening in the background is a harness pipeline with all the controls and all the different guardrails that you talked about, Martin, earlier being spinned off and starting to create this service. So as a developer, what we have is the ability and the flexibility to configure what's specific to my service, but within the guardrails that are already in place within the organization, within the team. So we get the speed, the consistency, the security without putting the burden on every individual developer to figure out from scratch how to do that.
Awesome. So again, very exciting. I love it. It matches really well with those principles and kind of gives that also that paved path production. So I know this is generating a pipeline. So can you talk us through the pipeline that it creates so that we can see the kind of things that it generates that gives that, that kind of freedom with guardrails and all those right checkpoints along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. So the pipeline we triggered was their service creation, but then beyond that, we can also take a look at the end-to-end pipeline that could be triggered as part of that workflow, which is basically how we get about going from that service creation or code commit all the way to deploying that into production. And the best way to start really is to look at this Visual Pipeline Studio view. And we often say that our platform, like Harness, was built for developers aged 20 to 70. What that really means is you can do everything as code, like traditionally. You can see here the whole pipeline being created in 1,000 lines of code being stored in whatever fashion that you like, whether it's a Git repository or within Harness, really. But you can also equally do anything on this UI in a drag and drop fashion. And regardless of the approach, changes will apply in a bi-directional way. So you can meet developers where they are in the practice that they prefer, really. Now, the real power comes from the fact that all these things, whether we're talking about a stage, whether we're talking about an individual step or a group of steps, can be saved as a template and can be wrapped around a template, right? And really, templates are a representation of these different workflows that are easy to create, easy to discover for developers, and easy to maintain and update at scale. For example, a platform team might come across a different template and decide to change it. And what you want really is all the different pipelines that use this template to be updated instantly without any manual work. And this is kind of the view that we're having here. You can see all the different templates for this service that can be used across different stages and all the different dependencies on it. Now, in this stage, you talked about automation. So we've got a bit of test automation. You can see a few security tooling that we integrate with, like SAST, SCA, container scanning, SBOM generation. And these are all pre-wired in that golden pathway that we triggered through the IDP. And it's worth mentioning that all these steps, the way they were created initially, was using the Harness Pipeline Studio and the pre-built steps that we have. So these are not just open source steps. These are created by Harness, maintained by Harness, which basically removes the need for developers to focus on or spend time really maintaining and creating very difficult CLI plugins and switching across different screens. Now, the last thing here, when we're talking about full life cycle, a great thing that is worth mentioning is that this unified experience and this templatization extends all the way throughout the SDLC, and continuous delivery is a perfect example. Take change approval as an example, like Jira, ServiceNow, ticket hubs. Normally, this is completely a separate workflow. You file a ServiceNow ticket before you deploy something into an environment. You wait for an approval. You manually kick off or resume the pipeline based on the approval process. But in Harness, all these things are orchestrated and built in within that golden pathway. So the platform automatically creates the ticket, pauses the pipeline, updates the tickets with automation, and continues the deployment without manual intervention. And the same thing really happens for deployments, right? We've seen with so many scenarios, customers saying, oh, every deployment is a snowflake, is a custom way of doing things. And the same thing applies for deployment strategies within Harness. So instead of teams scripting their own Canary deployment or blue-green logic, you can get these steps out of the box through a click. You can see here we have stage deployments, rolling deployments, Canary deployments, so all type of different things. And once you set them within your workflows, you can enable then your developers without having to reinvent the wheel to leverage these to create the consistency across the teams and all the services that you're deploying.
Awesome. So, I can't stress enough the value of, these kind of shared golden pathways to production. We actually had a US civilian agencies who shipped like mission critical apps, and they did that through 14,000 homegrown Jenkins jobs. Every compliance review, showed that they had drift, they had hard-coded passwords in there, they had missing approvals, they had inconsistent rollback logic, and they were modernizing to Kubernetes. Unfortunately, that only magnified the chaos. So they set their CIO set like this pretty audacious goal, if I'm honest, to collapse everything into a handful of centrally governed golden pipelines. And I know that as of February 28th, earlier this year, their last Jenkins job was retired. And today they have 10 golden pipelines, templates, that drive the releases of their 276 applications. And that's the kind of impact that really makes a difference, right? Going from managing 14,000 pipelines to managing 10 core templates that are shared across all the engineering teams just makes a huge difference. So I'm looking at all this, and my little niggly head is scratching at the back of me. And what happens if I'm an engineer and I'm doing my PR and I know the whiz scan is saying, hey, you can't go any further forwards because you have a security block. And I come in here and think, I'm just going to take out that whiz scan so I can get my code to production.
Yeah, so this is indeed a very common example, and let's try and reproduce this as I'm looking through this pipeline. So I'm doing my CI stage, I'm running a few security scanners, as you said, Wiz, or maybe an approval between a QA and production environment, or the Swiss scan or the SAS scan are preventing me from proceeding. And in today's setup, a developer could really just comment that up in the YAML and move on. But within Harness, it's actually not possible because of what you said. We're baking governance within the golden pathways from the get-go, as you can see here. So we have two different complaints from the pipeline. When I created this service using the golden pathway, the platform didn't just set up the repo and the CI/CD pipeline. It also baked RBAC and policy as code and security checks like scans and approval all automatically. And behind the scenes, Open Policy Agent enforces those rules at runtime, as you can see on the screen. So even if I try to skip a scan, the policy will kick in, it will block the pipeline. There's going to be no way around it as a developer. And that's exactly the point. We want to make it easy, as Martin said, for developers to do the right thing, and really, really hard to bypass these things and do the wrong thing. And ideally, they just want to follow the golden path, right? They don't want a complication of understanding it, etc. And security teams don't have to chase down violations because they know every pipeline is compliant and meets the standard by default. And that's basically how you move fast, stay compliant, and keep everyone aligned without slowing things down.
Awesome. So, while we're talking about security, more and more security and compliance is, a big part of what organizations need to do. And it is a challenge to move fast while doing all that security compliance, maybe generating SBOMs and everything else. So, how does that golden pathway and how do we help with that?
Yeah, so as you said, security and compliance can be like two of the biggest blockers moving fast. And it usually comes down to two things, noise and friction between different teams. So it's really hard to find organizations that have true sync between devs and security and a real DevSecOps practice. So the noise I was talking about earlier is all the scanner output. So if I go back to my CI stage, we're running probably 5 to 7 different security scans. And the friction usually happens during the handoffs, like the approvals, the ticketing that is happening that slows everything down. And if you've been a developer, you felt this pain being writing a feature, shipping the feature into an environment, and maybe 2 weeks later, you get a giant Excel sheet from security with no context, with no priority, just a massive list of issues, and now you're the one stuck basically sorting the issues out. And so Harness fixes that by shifting security left through the Open Policy Agent in a developer-friendly way, moving scanning and feedback into the build stage when it's fast, relevant, and easy to act on. Now, with security test orchestration, if I click on this pipeline execution, we don't just run the scans, we actually aggregate the result from all the different tools that we have in there. We deduplicate the findings, we normalize the data, and finally, we prioritize based on the risk. So instead of 18 noisy findings across 3 different tools, you get a single clean view of what actually matters and what needs to be fixed first. Now, if I look at this pipeline specifically, let's say we have a vulnerability that is being found, we can link it directly to the commit that introduced it. You can see here, this is the only thing that has been introduced at the back of this new build that I've been triggering. And you get a visibility into the information around the vulnerability. So we're linking back to the scanner, we have a description of it, we can understand where it sits within your application. And sometimes when you don't have the right remediations within the scanner itself or within the open source community, it can become pretty cumbersome to actually and time consuming to find a solution and resolution. So in this case, Harness has AI baked into the platform to help developer have a better experience while shifting that security left, and can help you understand the vulnerability, the remediation concept, the remediation steps, for example, and how to implement that within your code. Now, the other thing we talked about is context switching. So let's say we have that vulnerability, we want to make a change. We also have, just like in CI and CD, ITSM and ticketing systems, etc., baked into this view. So you can avoid, again, context switching. You can submit a PR or an exception request to your security teams right away without having to copy paste across 5, 6 different screens and waste all that valuable time you could be writing code for your organization and your teams. The other thing, very quickly, is software bill of materials. This is something that a lot of people start to care about. I used to be an engineer when Log4j happened, and unfortunately, we didn't have that. Uh,
Me too.
so if you look at the software bill of material, which is built into the pipeline as well, you get a full transparency into what's in your software, things like dependencies, licenses, versions, all captured automatically during CI/CD, which means you're always audit ready without chasing spreadsheets or manually tracking the components or the teams or the Jiras, etc. And with all this, holistically, we enable developers to stay focused, resolve issues faster, so that security becomes a really natural part of the delivery process as opposed to be a blocker.
Awesome. Absolutely awesome. So I think the last thing I wanted to cover before we do a quick summary here is, that last slide was metrics, metrics, metrics. So, tell us how we can, measure success and drive improvements.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said, we talked about a lot of core principles. We talked about golden pathways, we talked about automation, we talked about governance and developer experience. But the next question really is, how do we actually measure the success and keep improving over time as a team, for example? And that's where Harness really brings this together. So within Software Engineering Insights, you have things like DORA metrics to get started. So if you're not familiar with DORA, it gives you 4 key metrics that are strongly linked to high performing engineering teams. So you get metrics like lead time for change, which is really how long it takes to take code from commit to production, deployment frequency, so you can see how often you're pushing value to your end users, change failure rate, how often things break after a release, and time to restore, which is how long does it actually take for me to recover when things fail. And all these metrics are baked into Harness CD. So if you're using our pipelines, for example, you'll already collect all that information and that data automatically, and you'll get populated because it's all linked together. Now, if we look at metrics on their own, they're great for indication, but they don't always drive improvement. But context is what you need really to drive improvement. And that's where Software Engineering Insights provide that deeper developer-centric metric set. So it's connect across your different tool chains, so Jira, Git, CI/CD, and gives you the full picture of how work actually flows across your teams, right? And a prime example are things like, pull request lead time, how many end review changes you have, how many reviewers you have participating in a cycle, which basically, when you look at a deeper level, they can help you spot the bottlenecks. They can help you spot overloaded reviewers, really, and efficiencies, or areas where ownership isn't really clear within the team, and fix them before they slow down really the release velocity. If I scroll down, I'm also looking at other views that allow to answer questions like, how many times are my developers writing code a week? Do my most senior engineers get stuck firefighting support tickets? So all these type of things, SCI will surface and give you in a unified view, so you can check, rebalance, or coach your developers around how to be productive. Now, very quickly, a couple of things in terms of the sprints and the velocity. When it comes to planning, SCI also shows you how much work is being delivered as planned versus unplanned. So it will flag things like ticket hygiene issues, like unassigned tickets, missing descriptions, no due dates, all these little things that quietly kill velocity over time if not tackled. Now you can all see them in a single screen. If we look at business alignment as well, that view is really useful because it shows you how engineering time is actually spent on features, bug, tech debt, support, etc. So let's say you're aiming for 10% of your engineers' time to be spent on bugs, and you're at 25%. SCI will make it very, very easy to surface, and you can break things down by teams, individuals, and make informed decision on these things. And all that information you've seen so far, they feed into Trellis scores. So that's a balanced view, a summary or a balanced view of performance across velocity, quality, and impact, and collaboration across the teams. So it's not just how fast someone is actually coding, it also helps you understand how sustainably the teams can be delivering like that over time.
Awesome. That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you. I think what we're going to do here is I'm just going to switch the screen back to mine really quickly. There we go. And essentially what I'm going to do here is just kind of summarize everything that we've covered here today. So, you know, these principles that we talked about today, they can be applied across, you know, whatever toolchain you are using. The principles are valid regardless. And, you know, that's one of the key takeaways that we want to give here is, you know, that to make great DevX work, you need customer focus, right? You need those shared workflows, those shared ways of working. You need to unify your toolchain. So, you know, whether that is, you know, through great integrations and you know, the benefits that you've seen, you know, within Harness, that how kind of the benefits of that integrated platform, even when a lot of the information is coming from other tools, having one place to see it and access it as a pathway is just a, you know, it can be a game changer for engineering teams. We want that freedom with guardrails, right? We want our engineers to be innovative. We want them to come up with, you know, great, clever solutions, drive new features and, you know, fixes into our products that we deliver, you know, into the software we deliver every day. But ultimately, you know, there are regulatory and audit and, you know, requirements and good security that needs to be done. So we want to make it easy to do the right thing and hard to do the wrong thing. You know, make those choices easy for your engineers to allow your whole organization to be compliant. So, you know, and carrying on that theme, you know, it is about shifting the information left and not the work, right? You saw from what Hamza was showing that, you know, we had multiple security scanners. I mean, that is our demo environment, and we have many security scanners in there. But you could see how it's summarized out and said, hey, this is the one thing that you need to worry about. All these other ones were already there, right? But this is the one that you've introduced and the one that you need to worry about. And you can't proceed until we've got some kind of resolution on this, right? So it's giving them the right information at the right time and allowing them to solve that problem and making sure that they get the compliance through that policy as code. The same with the freedom as guardrails. You know, and finally, metrics, right? You need to be able to measure the success that you're having, but also be able to see where those problems are, you know, within teams, within the processes that you may have in place, you know, things that are taking time that maybe should be automated, should be better integrated, that allow you to have a good, consistent, you know, fast, reliable pathway and delivery process that really enables engineers to spend less time worrying about those things and more time, you know, really innovating and driving, you know, exciting things into the products and letting them do what they do best, which is really solving complex problems. And we want them to be solving the complex problems that are there for the consumers of the software they build, not in the processes that they need to go through to get the software out into the real world, right? So, you know, this is, you know, this is something that we at Harness are really focused on. We really want to help take away that toil. We want to help, you know, engineering teams be successful, you know, and we gave you a little bit of a flavor of how we do it at Harness here. And, you know, we'd love for you to come take a look at us and see if we can help you too. But these principles are global, and we would absolutely stick with them regardless. So before we wrap up here, we have a question around does Harness integrate with Argo CD? Absolutely is the answer. So I'm going to answer that live. So yeah, Harness is fully integrated with GitOps. Everything that you do in Harness has kind of a two-way Git integration anyway. What we do with things like Argo CD, though, is, we wrap around some of the pipelining functionality, those governance and compliance checks, the integration with change management, and those things to, take Argo CD to the next level to really allow that full experience, maybe that multi-environment experience that allows, really great integration and kind of takes it to that next level where you get all the benefits of Argo CD, but also the benefits around, the security, compliance, the governance, that single point of access to those golden pathways to production. That can include Argo CD. I think that is all the questions I have right now. I want to just really say thank you to Hamza for joining and supporting me. Obviously, want to say thank you to the thank you to our wonderful hosts for having us on today, to be able to talk about how you can empower your engineers. And I think with that, I think we'll wrap it up there and say thank you very much. Please feel free to reach out to us directly. You can find us on LinkedIn or through the Harness website. If you want to carry on the conversation and ask more questions, love talking about this stuff. So thank you very much. Thank you, Hamza.
Thank you, Martin and Hamza. It was really good having you both here present and answering all the questions. But yes, as Martin said, if you guys have any other questions, please feel free to get in touch with the Harness team. And thank you to everybody who's joined us today.